Goedemiddag collega's en geïnteresseerden. Bonjour monsieur Legeri. Tu sais, dans ce pays bizarre, on a 11 millions d'habitants, on a 6 gouvernements, 48 ministres et 3 langues officielles. Le néerlandais en Flandre, le français en Wallonie et l'allemand dans la partie germanophone. Mais si un Wallon veut parler avec un Flamand, on ne parle pas le néerlandais. On ne parle pas le français, mais on parle l'anglais. That's why I will switch to English. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today at VIBES, the research unit of Vlaams Belang. I have the honor of introducing someone whose professional life has not been shaped in lecture halls or in television studios, but on the very front lines where Europe is tested. For decades, Fabrice Leggeri has served one central mission, the protection of Europe and its citizens. And before entering the European Parliament, he built a long career at the highest levels of the French state, within the French Ministry of Interior. And he daily dealt with complex and sensitive challenges of our time: public order, national security, and of course, migration. And he later moved to the heart of Europe's border policy as director of Frontex, which is a European border and coast guard agency. And at Frontex, Fabrice was responsible for coordinating operations between member states, strengthening control of the EU external borders, and confronting illegal migration and cross-border crime. And he did so within a system, within a European system, that, to quote an infamous president, is sometimes too slow, for sure, and is in need of reform, for sure. But the difference is this: while others merely accept failure, Fabrice spent years fighting it. And his experience was not gained from reports or slogans. It was forged where Europe's borders are being tested every single day. And under immense political pressure and media scrutiny, today he serves as a member of the European Parliament for Rassemblement National, which is a part of the Patriots for Europe group. And he continues the same commitment. He brings experience instead of excuses, clarity instead of ambiguity, and seriousness to debates that too often avoid hard truths. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a man who did not merely observe Europe's failures, but stood on the very front line trying to fight them. Give a warm applause to Mr. Fabrice Leggeri.
Well, thank you very much, Federica, for the kind words. And thank you very much to all participants and friends. I'm honored to meet you today and to share my experience. Well, your party, the Vlaams, is part of the Patriots, and within the Patriots group in the European Parliament, we have very close cooperation. Migration and borders are one of the topics where we have a very close cooperation. And today, of course, because of my past experience, I will elaborate more on my experience on Frontex. I will try to outline what I had to face, the experience, and also I would like to share with you what is at stake. And because we are committed to political actions, how can we act in future to shape a better future for our people, for our citizens. I would like to start in saying what is the background, what are the facts, what is the definition of Frontex? What is Frontex, basically? Well, the name is the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, that's the official name, and Frontex is, let's say, the nickname. The mission is officially to support member states, so to support national border and coast guard in protecting the external borders, so the Schengen and EU external borders. protecting them against illegal crossings, so illegal migration, and supporting them in fighting where necessary, where appropriate, in fighting criminal activities at the external borders, such as, for example, human trafficking, which is, of course, related to migration. But there are also missions regarding while fighting against drugs traffickers, weapons trafficking, detection of terrorists. So that's on paper. That's the mission on paper. And for that, I, in fact, remember that when I joined the agency, as I was appointed and started my job in January 2015, which is a couple of months before the European Union experienced the big migration crisis. And you remember that in 2015, more than 1.8 million of illegal crossings, 1.8 million of illegal crossings were recorded, representing 1.2 million of people who entered illegally the European Union, which means that those people were not known, and we had almost zero background, security background about those people, and some of them were, let's say, involved in terrorist attacks. And this country, this city, Brussels, and in Flanders or in Belgium, you have also experienced what France experienced, so which means jihadists on your own territory. So the background, when I arrived as Frontex director, when I was appointed, was a small, very small agency with less than 300 staff, a 90 million euro annual budget, and let's say that the narrative in the agency was, we have no power, we respect fundamental rights, we respect and promote. Yeah, I forgot promote. We respect and promote fundamental rights. We have strategic partners with NGOs. And they said, but what about terrorist attacks? And how do we want to fight, or at least to support member states in preventing terrorist attacks? Because they all come, not all, but many come or might come from abroad. And we should detect them at the borders. The answer was, we respect and promote fundamental rights. We are not involved in terrorism. Okay. Then there was this big crisis in summer 2015, and the peak was in autumn 2015. There were some days with more than 20,000 illegal migrants crossing the external borders. At that time in Greece, there was a left-wing, far-left government, just happy to push them and to point to the north through the Balkan region. And then there was Angela Merkel saying, das schaffen wir, so we will manage to welcome all these migrants. And this was the green light for all flows of migrants heading to Germany. Against that background, political background, the Commission, and there was a Greek European Commissioner in charge of migration, and let's say he was from the EPP, so center-right, and so they decided with Juncker to beef up the means of the agency. And then there was a sudden increase of the budget and staff. So from 2015 to 2022, so during my 7 years as Frontex director, I had, let's say, two challenges. I will first start with challenge number one, that was how to transform an agency that had never been designed as a law enforcement agency, so, and was a very small organization. So that was the challenge number one. if I may say, this was just a normal challenge for a civil servant, something that can be done with professionalism and if you have some possibility to recruit the right people. Challenge number 2 is completely different. It's a political challenge. And challenge number 2 was an ambiguity about the mission, about the culture of the organization. Because there were many people saying, it has to be a humanitarian agency, helping migrants, having strategic partnership with NGOs. My approach was, let's be professional. What member states expect, what national governments expect, is support by an organization that should develop into a sort of supporting law enforcement agency. Supporting member states, because member states are sovereign, they have the primary role in protecting the external borders, and they are sovereign member states. And they can decide what to do at the border, what they don't want to do, and how maybe they would like to get support and help. So I will quickly go through some of the challenges, and if there are questions later, we can discuss this. But the increase of budget, of course, skyrocketing from, let's say, 100 million euro per year to 1 billion euro per year, so multiplied by 10, within a time frame of 6-7 years, which is huge. I remember that I was always saying, money is not the only issue. I don't need to have too much budget too quickly, because we need to define what is the mission, and we have to put in place, well, the mechanism inside the agency to recruit people. Another challenge was recruitment. I said we had 300 or less than 300 staff in 2015 when I was appointed director of the agency. The goal was to have 1,000 staff by 2020, but those were not staff allowed to work on operational matters. So my reaction was, I'm not sure I need so many bureaucrats sitting in an office. I need operational people if we really want to protect the borders. Then there was a second revision of the regulation and the missions, saying that the objective was to put in place the European Border and Coast Guard, which means that for the first time in history, the objective was to have EU staff allowed to carry and use weapons under the supervision of national law in the member states. So, for example, at Zaventem Airport, this would be under the Belgian Federal Police, wearing uniforms and looking like a sort of border police supporting member states. There were many legal issues, because it's very easy to put in an EU regulation that the European Border and Coast Guard carries weapons and may use weapons under the supervision of national law. But then, how do you make it happen? So I had all these legal issues, how to procure legally weapons. So there were many challenges. There were challenges regarding recruitment, because the European Commission wanted the EU staff regulation to be implemented without exception. But I had to explain, sorry, but the EU staff regulation has been designed for people sitting in an office in Brussels or in Luxembourg, and not for people on the ground carrying weapons and arresting bad guys, criminals. So there were many challenges, as you can imagine. And another issue was what kind of activities member states expected from this agency. And so I had to promote the services that we could deliver. So there was a sort of, we named it a catalog of service. So I was touring across Europe. So of course in southern member states it was about registering migrants, flows of migrants, but in other countries, like in Belgium, it was to support with returns, because Frontex had also the mandate to help returning illegal clandestine migrants. So these were the let's say, what I would call the normal challenges, but that can be overcome if we can work in a professional way. And now I'm coming to the second challenge, which is probably the most interesting in this, with this audience, because it's a political challenge. I told you that there were many saying, and first of all in the European Parliament, the Socialists, the Greens, the far left, Renew, and I must say also some very weak, coward center-right, saying, yeah, but we should protect borders while fully complying with the fundamental rights and promoting the fundamental rights and all blah, blah. So first, I was accused because I never said that my job was to promote fundamental rights. I was always saying, fine, it's like the Constitution. Our actions have to comply with fundamental rights. Dignity of people, fine. Promoting fundamental rights, I'm not an NGO, I'm not a militant. But the mindset and brought me to the conclusion, led me to the conclusion that, in fact, there is a cultural battle. And what erupted when I resisted to European Commissioner Ylva Johansson, the leftist Swedish commissioner in charge of migration, who told me during our first meeting in October 2019, she said, you don't need weapons, you don't need uniforms, border guards don't need weapons nor uniforms, because, and now I'm quoting, because migrants come for love. What she meant, I don't know. Migrants come for love. Your job, and then she threatened me, your job, whether you like it or not, is to welcome migrants. And she was looking at me in a way that, well, was really not nice. And she said, because Europe is an aging continent, so your job, and she stressed again, whether you like it or not, your job is to welcome migrants. And I was thinking, that's going to be very hard with that one. I will play with the member states, with national authorities, and I had this naive hope at that time that in the management board of the agency, where every member state has one representative plus one deputy representative, and the Commission has only 2 representatives plus 2 deputy representatives. I was thinking, if my calculation is correct, I will get a majority. I will explain to the representative of the member state, to the national representatives, I will explain what is at stake, and I will make a deal with them to really promote the law enforcement dimension, to let the culture of security prevail over this humanitarian culture. I also discovered that there were many Trojan horses. Trojan horses, I can give you 2 examples. First, in the European Commission. In 2017, 2018, at that time there was a left-wing government in Greece, And the Hellenic police, so the Greek police, was reporting that they were prevented from doing their job by their Greek leftist government, who preferred to deploy NGOs to welcome migrants, and the Hellenic police was simply put aside. And I sent a letter. Maybe I was too naive. I was a civil servant at that time. I was not a politician. And I sent a letter to complain. I sent a letter to the Commission, to the European Commission, saying, this is what is reported by the Hellenic police, and this is a matter of concern because the Hellenic police cannot do its job, and because our job is to support the Hellenic police, if the Hellenic police cannot do its job, we cannot do our job. And I also added, and I don't understand why the European Commission is funding those NGOs and those organizations preventing the Greek police from doing its job. I got a phone call from the Commission saying, and this was somebody who wanted to help me. More a friend, I'm still in touch with that person. And he said, you know, next time, if you get this kind of findings, call me on the phone. But what you did now really annoyed many people at very high level. So this was kind of elements piling up and portraying me as a person who didn't like migrants and want to prevent them from coming. There was another opportunities with Federica Mogherini. At that time, she was the high representative, so sort of, high representative in charge of external relations of the European Union. And I made a statement saying that rescuing migrants at sea is not the primary mission of Frontex. It's just a side mission because when we are monitoring the external borders, in particular in the Mediterranean Sea, of course, it happens that we detect people in distress, and that triggers rescue, but our main objective was not, and it doesn't have to be the first objective, to bring all the migrants. Rescuing them, yes, but then bringing them back to the coast where they departed. So back home, back to the country they are coming from. Mogherini was not happy, and she wanted me to be fired. At that time, I must say, there was a center-right Greek European Commissioner, Avramopoulos, and he managed, and there were some people who helped me, and they said, well, this was too straightforward, be careful. So there were many incidents like this. There was another one in summer 2017. I had developed some air surveillance deployed in the Mediterranean Sea. And we were able, with drones and planes, to detect that NGOs, let's say in the corridor between Libya, Sicily, and Italy mainland, that there were NGOs working hand in hand with smugglers based in Libya, and that there were advertising, there were websites, there were different kind of communications, and they detected that we were flying over the zone, and we were able to, let's say, document that this was not simply NGOs rescuing people in distress. These were appointments planned at sea. So this is a criminal activity. In the meantime, there was an Italian minister in charge of Home Affairs who told me, if you can collect documents to be shared with Italian judicial police, please share this with the competent Italian authorities. As this is in the mandate to collect personal data, to collect information that may be used for the fight against criminal activities, this is what we did. And there was a prosecutor in Catania, in Sicily, very experienced prosecutor, who decided to seize NGOs' boats. So there was some economic effect on NGOs. That was great. But then NGOs wanted to lodge complaint against Frontex, because they wanted to know, in fact, they wanted to know how we were able to collect this kind of evidence. So then they sent a request to the so-called European Ombudsman to request public access to documents. There is an EU regulation, and according to that, so they wanted to know the name, the number of all vessels deployed by Frontex between 1st of July and 1st of October 2017, and they wanted to know the mission, they wanted to know the number of aircraft, drones, etc., the precise mission every day. I refused. When I saw this request, I told my chief lawyer, find the legal basis, I refuse. This is security. Bullshit. I refuse to disclose this. Then the NGOs went to the European Ombudsman. European Ombudsman said, they have not found maladministration in my decision to refuse. So that was somehow endorsed. The European Ombudsman was not really comfortable with my decision, but could not find any breach of European law and said, there is no maladministration. So the NGOs went to the Court of Justice of the European Union, and there was a long process, and we won. With our lawyers, with Finnish Coast Guard that we used as expert, we won the case. And there was even the jurisprudence saying that when security interest, public security interest is at stake, it is possible to refuse the disclosure of this kind of information. But the European Commission and the European Commissioner, Johansson, was not happy at all. So these are elements I can show you. And then came the campaign about the so-called pushbacks. In fact, I think it's important to clarify that the notion of pushbacks that is always used by NGOs, by the Commission, this is not a legal concept. This is just a slogan used by NGOs, used by all these organizations that would like to have open borders. What they say is, we are not allowed to block migrants at external borders because we never know. There might be some asylum seekers, and so just in order to give them the possibility to apply for asylum, we should let them in, and then let's see. So my approach was, and this is also EU law, this is the Schengen Acquis, saying that illegal crossings of the Schengen external borders and of the EU external borders shall be prevented. Illegal crossings shall be prevented. And person crossing illegally the borders, the external borders, shall be sanctioned. And then the European Commission was saying, yeah, but you are trying to find a piece of EU law that suits you and your views. I said, but this is what member states expect. Do you think that they expect me to use 1 billion euro per year just to open the borders? Sorry, that's not my job. So this was the political controversy. And then there were even bigger contingent of Trojan horses. This is the so-called fundamental rights officer, who is the chief of a troop of, at that time, 40 or 50 fundamental rights monitors deployed in the field, if I may say, to spy what Frontex operational staff was doing and to spy what member states were doing. And first of all, they wanted to spy Greece, because meanwhile, Greek voters opted for a right-wing government in Athens, and that government told me, now we want to block. We don't care about the notion of pushback. We just want to know what are the legal possibilities to block the boats. And we worked on that. And I think it went pretty well. From a legal perspective, this was crystal clear that this is possible, and we used the concept of interception. Interception means if you suspect that a boat is used for criminal activities, you may refuse that boat to enter your territorial water, or you may give the instruction to leave. This is what the Hellenic Coast Guard started. And with Frontex deployment, we were helping in the detection of this kind of illegal criminal activities. But then they needed a case against me, because this was going too far. And then there was, in October 2020, they were starting with the German newspaper Der Spiegel. They started a campaign against me and against Greece, saying, so they were displaying what I think were fake videos. While the source was the Turkish Coast Guard, providing those videos to so-called investigative junior journalists. So they got a grant to study some cases. And the grant was given by whom? By Soros organization. The guy who doesn't want us to protect our borders. And then they spread this on a Friday evening, because then it's good, because people have time, the readers have time over the weekend. And the commissioner, the leftist commissioner, called me on the phone 20 minutes after this was released online and saying, I'm waiting for your explanations. And my answer was, do you trust that this is true, or do you think this is fake? And why do you trust NGOs? And why don't you trust staff, administrative staff, and normally you should trust that we have been professional. And this started, and they, well, probably expected me to resign within a couple of days. And I was able to resist for more than 1.5 years. So then they opened investigations. They searched my office, they searched my computer, my phone, the computer and the phone of my head of cabinet. They found out that some days I was texting, maybe this was naive, but I was texting my head of cabinet saying, we don't need fundamental rights monitors, these are Red Khmer, I don't need Red Khmer in the field. And then he was answering, well, laughing and obviously enjoying this kind of joke. And they built a case on that, saying that we don't like migrants, we don't care about the unconditional right of migrants to come to Europe. And they also asked me why I was so keen on protecting the national security of Greece and not keen on protecting the fundamental rights of migrants. Because I explained that the Greek government had informed me they had intelligence that Erdogan and so Turkey intended to flood Greece and the European Union with migrants. So not simply, let's say, smugglers helping illegal migrants, but really a policy, a deliberate action with the political intention of a so-called hybrid threat. And this was also in the context after, there was a battle in Idlib, Syria, and Turkey had complained that they had not sufficient support from NATO allies and from European allies. I don't want to enter into that, the merit of that discussion, but I was alarmed by the fact that Turkey said, now Europe will pay for that. So we didn't know exactly who were potentially terrorists infiltrated by Turkey. We don't know. Anyway, the Olaf investigators, let's say, because they were used for political purposes by the European Commission, they have found nothing that justified. There was nothing to be brought to a criminal court, and there was nothing that deserved disciplinary proceedings against me. And this was also then confirmed by the management board of the agency of Frontex. But they got what they wanted to get. They wanted to kick me out of the agency, and they had the best guy serving that policy in Paris, Emmanuel Macron. And they said, no, he should resign because now we are fed up with all this plan to protect the borders, and that's enough. So I got support from, the Greek government, center-right, that was more than center-right when it comes to migration. I got support from Hungary, from Viktor Orban. I got support from Matteo Salvini. I got support from the Polish government at that time, Law and Justice, peace government, and many other, let's say, very tough on migration. And they told me, you don't care about Macron. Refuse to resign. It was difficult because, of course, Germany had shifted to a social democrat minister. So I was thinking, I have the European Commissioner against me. I have France, my own country, against me. Now Germany, socialist government against me. So it's not workable anymore. But now I will conclude and try to outline some actions, some possible political actions that I would recommend. First, I think that member states, so national representatives sitting in the management board of Frontex, should really act, and they should not be quiet as they are, because they were simply nodding when the European Commission was saying this is illegal, these are the fundamental rights, and blah blah blah. So I think that national representative representing the commanders of the commanders themselves, they should be vocal, they should speak up. So that's first. So if you have any possibility as Vlaams Belang to have a say or to insist and ask the federal government in Belgium, how are you participating in the debate in the management board of Frontex? What's your position? So I think that is a first possibility of action. I was thinking the problem was the Commission, because in fact all these activities protecting the borders are related to either migration or security, fight against criminal activities, which means that these are sovereign powers of our nations. And therefore, I was in favor of the fact that the director of the agency, and probably I would say the same about Europol, should report directly to the Council of the European Union and should not be filtered by the European Commissioner and the European Commissioner blocking what the director of those agencies would like to discuss with the member states. And then there is an opportunity. And the opportunity is that now the European Commission, Commissioner Magnus Brunner from EPP, so we don't have the leftist Swedish Johansson anymore. So he is preparing a revision of the mandate of the agency, which means that the founding regulation will be amended. And I think that we should use this opportunity to say, we don't want to have 30,000 staff at Frontex if we don't know clearly what is the mission. Because the plan, now announced by von der Leyen, is they would like to have 30,000 staff. And I think we should simply say, first, define precisely the mission, and then we can talk about the means. And then we can talk about how many staff members and the budget. But we can use this to kick out the fundamental rights officer and the fundamental rights monitors. Because this has been my battle. I was also accused of delaying the recruitment of the fundamental rights officer. And there were then former staff or staff saying, yes, we have witnessed how the executive director was saying recruiting the fundamental rights monitors is not my priority. So this was just to say that they are Trojan horses inside. The full context was that we had to recruit 1,000 border guards, and my priority was not the 40 fundamental rights monitors. My priority was the 1,000 operational staff. But that's the situation. They are independent. They are paid by the budget of the agency. And they undermine the operational activity. I can give you a last example, and then I hope that we can have questions and answers. And the example was not in Greece because we had already this battle about the pushbacks, but this was in Lithuania. And this is in summer 21. Belarus was pushing migrants from Congo. Probably they wanted to go to Belgium. But they were pushing migrants brought from Congo to also bother the EU. And they wanted to push them to Lithuania and to Poland. Lithuania requested support. I deployed within a couple of hours 100 European staff of the agency with cars, because this is a land border, so we had the cars, we could deploy the patrolling cars. And then the fundamental rights monitors, they were watching the activity and saying, so addressing the staff in the field. All the instructions you get from your boss is not correct. The operational plan agreed by the director of Frontex, or at the time I was the director, agreed with the Minister of Interior of Lithuania, this operational plan is against European values, I'm quoting. Because, in fact, these are pushbacks of migrants at land borders. And there were even fundamental rights monitors invited by the national public radio in Lithuania, and they were simply criticizing the action of protecting the border. So these are Trojan horses, and we should really get rid of these Trojan horses. So for me, the priority is get rid of all these NGO culture, get rid of the fundamental rights monitors, get rid of the staff that is more, let's say, leaning on the side of the NGOs, get professional, define clearly the mission. How can the agency support member states and national forces? And then we can have a plan and we can see if the agency has to grow or if we simply have to cut the means. So thank you very much. Probably it was too long, but I'm ready for questions and answers.
Thank you for your illuminating speech. I do want to add one conclusion, and that is we have to get rid of Ursula von der Leyen. And I think we need pushbacks in order to protect Europe. And I am very active on social media. I make lots of videos on asylum and migration. And there is one question that keeps popping up, and that is why? Why does the European Union tolerate mass illegal migration? And why does Europe actively push for more legal migration? Because that's the new agenda. I do want to know your vision on this.
Well, definitely Europe is naive and European leaders, there are some exceptions in Hungary, there are exceptions with Matteo Salvini and other leaders, members of our political family, or like-minded if I include the European Conservative and Reformists. But most of the current European leaders, and in particular Ursula von der Leyen, and I fully agree to what you said, we should get rid of her. So they are not interested in promoting the interests of European citizens and our nations. They are not interested in that. Emmanuel Macron is even more in a worse situation because he even said that there is no French identity. And he said that almost 10 years ago. So we have, unfortunately, political leaders who most of the time use their power and their resources simply to undermine our interests, to open borders, and to destroy our identity and our culture. So what I see is that there is a sort of, they hijacked, and with NGOs, and we see that there are many EU funds allocated to NGOs, and we see that this is really, it's not an accident, it's a deliberate policy to undermine our identities. And now there is this narrative that we are, as Johansson told me, an aging continent. But there are other opportunities. First of all, we have probably many citizens who are jobless and would like to find a job. I'm quite sure that this is the case in Flanders, but this is the case in France for sure, and in many other European countries. So first, we should train them, and we should not invite so-called talents coming from abroad. So this is absolutely a nonsense. But then there is a cultural battle, and this is perhaps even worse than an economic wrong policy. And the cultural battle is hate against what we are and our identity. And now you have this constellation where you have the EU Commission funding NGOs, funding NGOs and organizations which are very close to the Muslim Brotherhood, who want to infiltrate our national, European, perhaps local institutions, in particular at local city level, municipal level. So they want to infiltrate our universities, our school, and they are let's say the woke. There is the woke ideology, which is another way to undermine our identity, to undermine common sense. And so if you combine both of them, you come with the death of European nations.
That was quite depressing, but let's talk about disinformation and hate speech, because under the pretext of fighting disinformation, freedom of speech is becoming under pressure in Europe. And the so-called democracy shield claims to protect democracy, but it relies on vague definitions that risk turning legitimate opinions into forbidden speech. And in particular, those who are critical of migration policy and risk being accused of hate speech. We have that also in our country. Tell us more about this democracy shield.
Well, this is really a concern, and I'm not sure that all citizens are aware of the existence of this so-called shield of European democracy. Now, the establishment, Brussels establishment, when I'm saying Brussels, it's not the city of Brussels, it's the EU, it's the Commission. So the Commission says they are foreign interference. So at the very beginning, this was Putin and Russia. And we were labeled as friends of Putin, more or less. Now it's different. Now we are labeled as friends of Donald Trump, a far-right US administration, Vice President Vance, Elon Musk. So that's now the threat as it is described by those who want to promote this shield. There is a committee in the European Parliament. I'm also a member of that committee. And now we are working on a report that was drafted with some proposals. It was not drafted by us, but we will do our best to amend it and to let people know, to communicate about the fundamental threat for democracy. They want to create, if I remember correctly the name, the European Resilience Center for Democracy. So when the European Commissioner, McGrath, an Irish commissioner, a member of Renew, when he came to present the report, I told him, now 1984, the Orwellian world becomes a reality. And you, Commission, will make it happen. So they want to scrutinize everything. They would like to use chat control. They want even to predict what you're going to say. They want to predict what you're going to do. And they want to redress things that are, according to them, not correct. So we are labeled as far-right because we don't like migrants, because we don't like the destruction of our identities, because we want to simply come back to common sense policy, and because we are against the woke ideology. So in a nutshell, for all these reasons, we are now probably facing a risk of being silenced. So that's the so-called democratic shield.
I do think that it is very important that everybody dares to speak up. That's why I went into politics 4 years ago. We need to speak up for our own thoughts, even though it might be threatening and we have hostile neighborhoods. But does anybody have any questions? Because it is important to speak up, and Flemish people are often silenced and they let themselves go. So does anybody have questions?
Very good question. So he has a foundation, so the Soros Foundation, and he has been promoting very toxic views for more than a decade. I remember him being in the European Parliament in 2015. I had just been appointed executive director of Frontex. And he said that the European Union doesn't need an agency to protect the border, but the European Union needs ways to let migrants in. So that was the narrative. So I think that Soros is part of this toxic culture that infiltrated institutions, national governments, and let's say all those who are intimidated and would like to be considered as mainstream people, mainstream media. So, you know, no waves. So this is their approach. They just want to remain unnoticed. But if you start speaking up, if you start saying what Soros is doing is toxic, then you're not mainstream anymore. So Soros has a very, very toxic role and detrimental role to our identities. It's part of the cultural battle, and I think that there is a legislative battle, of course, in parliaments, but there is a cultural battle. And if we don't win that battle, we will be silenced. So Soros is part of the battle, and we have definitely to fight against him.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your resilience in Europe and in France and in the European Parliament. We have some last concluding question.
Yeah, if I may. Thank you for your speech, Mr. Legeri. I have one question about, you mentioned the human rights officers at the border in Lithuania. I found this very intriguing, and probably the problem is that our society or our rule of law has become too law-centric, where we have certain political commissars, because that's what I would say they are, the way you describe them, are basically they're defining policy, and you see this in other aspects as well, where you have several litigations where court systems are forcing governments to adapt certain climate goals. So my question to you is, how do we really, as a right-wing movement, tackle the concept of gouvernement des juges and law centricism? Because to me, this really is one of the key things we should tackle. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for bringing up that very important and strategic question. This is about the role of judiciary, and you also touched upon the concept of the rule of law and the way it is misused by the European Commission. This is just a way to silence political parties like ours, and this is a way, it has become, let's say, a way to silence the people identity. Now, when I see the so-called rule of law report published every year by the European Commission, first of all, there is a guy, former commissioner in charge of justice, Renders. I think this guy is known in Belgium. The next day after he ended his role as a European commissioner, I think that the Belgian police was investigating and searching his house for some very strange lottery game. Anyway, that was leading by example, very likely. So the rule of law report, very interesting. It's always about Hungary and Orban. It used to be against Poland and the law and justice government. It's always about the so-called right-wing, conservative, populist, far-right, blah, blah, blah. against migrants, spreading hate speech, promoting the views that national interests should prevail and not all the migrants, and that's the narrative. They wanted to now bother Italy, because although Giorgia Meloni tries to play it in a smarter way with the Commission, now it's going too far. The Italian government wants to put some order in the public TV and radio in Italy, because this is paid by Italian taxpayers. And this is everywhere the same, that public, I don't know, in Flanders or in Belgium. In France, I can tell you, it's always the same. Public TV, public radio, it's always far-right bashing, conservative bashing, it's pro-migrants, pro-woke, etc. Paid by the French taxpayers. So if any government, when we are in charge, either of your region in Flanders or any kind of political institutional constellation, when we are in charge, then if we want to address this, the European Commissioner will come with a report on the rule of law, and they will say that this is against freedom of speech. So I think that the problem of judiciary is not whether it is independent or not. The problem is whether it is neutral. I think that we can all agree that judges should be, and judiciary has to be independent. But I think we can all agree that it should be neutral. And this is another cultural battle that we have to where we have to be very active. So there are many fronts: the rule of law, judiciary, academics, let's see, research centers, and what kind of things are funded by the Commission and by, let's say, politically, political interests that are against us. So there is a wide range of fights. So migration is one of them. Protecting our border is necessary. Fighting against mass migration is necessary, because otherwise we will lose our countries, and we are not far from that. But there are many other fronts: judiciary, rule of law, media. So there is a lot of work for everyone in our political family.
And I do think that courts and case law are making a strict migration policy impossible. So even if we would truly have a right-wing strict migration policy, the next big thing to tackle is case law, and we need to find a way around this problem. So I want to thank you, Mr. Leggeri, and I also want to introduce the head of Vibes, Mr. Tom van den Driessen.
Just some short closing remarks. I met Fabrice, I think it was in 2023 or 22, I'm not sure, when we visited with a delegation of the ID group, the Frontex office in Warsaw. I was really impressed to visit these brand new offices, but really impressed by the professionalism which reigned, in my opinion, in Frontex, and especially with the head of the Frontex that time, which we all know by now. What I also noticed when visiting Frontex is that all of these officials are just trying to do their job in the best suitable way, but they get sabotaged all the time, not only by fundamental rights officers who are put in place in the situation room. I still remember there's this one chair. I just wonder, this person who is then the fundamental rights officer, his job is basically sabotaging the whole aspect of what Frontex professionals are doing. What is this guy or this woman doing at lunch? Is anybody eating with him, or what's happening over there? Now, I think you rightly pointed out that migration is not some kind of natural phenomenon or something like that. It's deliberate, policy. It's organized, well organized, not only in the political sphere, but also in the social-cultural sphere. It has supporting groups in NGOs in society which are funded by numerous state actors, such as the European Union, where our colleagues from the Fidesz party has done some research about. And as it is deliberate policy, it can also be changed. Because this is what democracy is basically all about. The people have the power to determine who represents them and what kind of policies represent them. But this is exactly what the European institution, the European Union, does not want. They want free elections, and they want the illusion of having a choice, but they want that the same kind of policies remain in place in the regards, for example, on Green Deal policies, or in migration policies, or in gender ideology spreading through our schools. I think therefore the basic goal of our movements, not only in Flanders or in France, but all across Europe, is that we must realize it is fundamentally a democratic choice that we are giving back to the people, that they actually have the power to choose for different kind of policies. And in order to do this, we need to unite all of the people in our society, where they come from the left, from the right, even if they have maybe some foreign-born backgrounds. But we need to unite everybody in order to give our society a new kind of policy, because if we do not stop this migration, if we do not turn it around 180 degrees, then it's as simple. We will become a minority in our own country. And this is exactly what the European Commission is all about, what their policies is all about. They want to abolish, they want to erase the identity using the tool of mass migration, whether it's legal or illegal migration, doesn't matter. And why do they want to do that? Because they want to abolish the sovereignty of European nation states, therefore abolish democracy, therefore take the power away from the citizens and put it in the hands of unelected technocrats. So I may conclude if François Mitterrand, he once said that nationalisme c'est la guerre, nationalism is war. Well, I have a different opinion. I think liberalism is war, I think socialism is war, and nationalism is peace, prosperity, and democracy. Thank you.